Good evening and welcome to the webinar. How do you create a better community response to mental health crisis? The webinar is brought to you by the Pictou County Mental Wellness Roundtable. My name is Suanne Musick and I'm your moderator for this session this evening. We would like to begin by acknowledging that our session this evening is taking place in Mi'kmaq, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. The treaties in this land were signed in the spirit of peace and friendship, and we are all treaty people. We are pleased you are here to learn more about mental health issues in Pictou County and to join with us in thinking about how we can work together to create better community responses to mental health crisis. If you are having technical issues, please let us know in the chat box and we will provide support. We are recording the webinar, so if you need to step away from your screen or would like to share the webinar later, the recording will be available. Before we move to the webinar, I would like to point out a few Zoom features, and that will be useful to you and everyone as we proceed. The only people who will appear on the screen are our speakers, and everyone is muted except for the speakers. We've allotted everyone time after the speakers for questions. You can ask a question through the Q&A function in Zoom. It is down below beside the chat box. So jot down your questions and we will address them after all of the speakers have done their presentations. We may not have time to get to all the questions, but we will do our best in the time that we have. Now I would like to introduce Dominic Boyd. He is the co-chair of the Pictou West Community Health Board and the chair of the coordinating committee of the Mental Wellness Roundtable. Dominic will provide some background on why we are here together this evening. Dominic?
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. I've noticed that there's a bit of slowness, even though I'm using my little cell phone as a hotspot. It's a little slow. So if it's okay, I'll just do the audio and not the video.
Sure.
So I definitely want to welcome everybody to the webinar tonight. It's been an exciting process that we've been following to build this webinar. This all came about in about middle of last year when we were talking about creating a mental wellness project for Pictou County at the Pictou West Community Health Board meetings. And me, as having a background in mental health, I was naturally attracted to the concept of doing something on a health promotion basis in Pictou County to improve mental wellness. And we began talking about the idea of promoting resilience, building resilience in the county, and how might that happen. We thought that perhaps it would be helpful to learn something more about resilience from a well-known expert, which is Dr. Michael Langille. This resulted in a number of parties coming together to fund and support the workshop that we held in February 2020. And this workshop was with Dr. Michael Langille and was very well received. We had over 60 people attending from, I think, at least 50 different agencies. We called that group the Roundtable because we saw that as a chance for people to get to know each other and bring issues forward and learn to work together on a roundtable basis. But due to the size of the roundtable, we felt that there should be a smaller group that coordinated the activities around the roundtable and lent it some direction. So we formed a coordinating committee. And as Suanne mentioned, I've been chairing the committee for the last little while. We began to have some follow-up meetings and discuss some ideas for some resilience projects. One of the ideas that we talked about was anxious children and anxious parents, and could there be some sort of further work done to support families and help them build stronger mental wellness habits in their lives. As we were going over some ideas, Mayor Nancy Dix, she began to attend our meetings and she spoke about the need to enhance the mental health crisis responses. Some of the issues included the amount of time that the police have to spend at the hospital when they bring people who are in mental health problems. When they bring them to the hospital, the police can spend quite a long time there with them. And there were concerns around that sometimes people were seen and then judged to be okay to go home, but there was kind of like a lack of immediate follow-up. And sometimes we felt that perhaps people were being seen and sent home, but they might have been afraid or feeling stigmatized, etc., regarding getting help. And so they sometimes languish. So we were concerned that perhaps there is a need for more support for people for an immediate follow-up when there's a mental health crisis of some sort. This led to some discussion around solutions, and Ryan Leil from the police force informed us about a program called the Hub Model, which is in Fredericton and what we're going to learn about tonight. And we had some discussion around the possible creation of a mental health navigator role, so that if someone was in a crisis, someone could team up with them and assist them in accessing resources and helps in the community. So that led to the decision to hold this webinar, which we're having this evening. We're involving the community, we're involving agencies, and we want to build some solutions. So, thank you. That's the background. We cannot hear you.
All right. Thank you, Dom. My technology is a little slow as well tonight, so. Okay, I would like to introduce the panelists, the speakers on our panelists now, each of whom will bring unique perspective on improving community responses to mental health crisis. Sherry Blinkhorn. Sherry is the owner of Blinkhorn Real Estate Limited and a familiar face in the real estate world in Pictou County since 2009. Sherry has been a mental health advocate for many years. She is past president of the Canadian Mental Health Association and has served on many of the boards and organizations related to mental health. Sherry currently facilitates the Family Matters program and works with the Mental Health Foundation of Nova Scotia on a province-wide initiative to change the way people think about mental health. So welcome, Sherry. Ryan Leil. Ryan is originally from New Glasgow. He has been a police officer for 17 years, starting in the General Patrol section of the New Glasgow Regional Police and consistently promoted within the police force over the years. Ryan has a bachelor's degree in community studies from Cape Breton University. He is also a graduate of the Atlantic Police Academy and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Training Academy. In 2019, Ryan was a recipient of the Chief's Condemnation for outstanding contributions to the Pictou County Integrated Street Crime Enforcement Unit and for his strong commitment to enhancing partnerships in the community. Thanks for joining us, Ryan. And Monique Harquail. Monique is a social worker with the Fredericton Police Force. She has been with the force for almost 4 years. She is the Fredericton Police Force's mental health coordinator and works with the community partners and agencies to assist individuals coming into contact with the police due to their mental health needs. So we're going to start with Sherry, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Suanne. It's great to be here. I'm not quite sure what I can add to the conversation. I think much of what I could say would be things that I've been heard saying for years. In fact, when I was preparing for the chat this evening, I got out my old scrapbook and it would look back in 1998, and I was on the front page talking about mental health being a community responsibility and how I really believe that. So first I want to say that for the people out there who don't know who I am, and for those who maybe think they know who I am, probably asking yourself the question, what could Sherry Blinkhorn possibly know about mental health? And so sometimes we just never know what motivates another person to be the advocate or to do the things that they do. So you might see my real estate signs out and around, but really what has motivated me to be a mental health advocate is growing up in a young age, surrounded by family members who had severe mental illness, caused me to study mental illness as a very young person. And I often say that a mental health advocate was born at a very short person. And I've always been intrigued by mental illness, and realized very young, couldn't articulate it the way I can today, that even though my mother's and my grandmother's perception of life wasn't mine, it was theirs. And I always knew that they were entitled to it because they were humans first. So that said, being an advocate for years and studying, knowing it from a firsthand perspective, but then growing up and learning about mental health and mental illness in a textbook sense, I learned that way. But I also have had my own issues with mental health and depression. And something else I thought, it's funny how life comes full circle. Today, it didn't dawn on me until today that being on a panelist with Leil, he would remember what a lot of people don't know is that back in 2008, I had my own attempt of suicide. And it was what I thought was a well planned out a plan. Didn't go so well, or I guess it did go so well because I'm here to tell the story. But back then I really did feel like that was the thing I should do. And Brian was actually instrumental in saving my life. And I never forgot Ryan in the sense that he actually came back to the hospital to check on me. So it's funny how things come full circle. But anyway, so enough about me. Why I'm a mental health advocate, but my phone rings weekly. Some days I don't know if I'm selling real estate or I'm trying to help people through their mental health, maneuver their way through the system, which we all know has some serious issues. I think what I hear about most often is the lack of access, the lack of education, people not knowing where to turn, how to get involved. And, I actually, the power of social media, I throw it out there to ask the question in preparation for this webinar of any solutions that people would have. And my inbox was inundated with the problems, but there were some good solutions. But I think they're what we all know we need. And happy to hear about the whole the mention of a mental health navigator, because I think we actually need one for our province and for each community. And I think each community knows what community needs. So lack of access, lack of education. I think another thing that would be really helpful would be if all teachers, all first responders, anybody that's working in healthcare, and even employers had access to mental health first aid. I think it's a really important thing where, most businesses are mandated to have first aid, physical first aid. So why not have mental health first aid? I'm often heard saying as well that without good mental health, there is no health, because it all starts up here. So, your mind dictates to your body. So sometimes we really minimize just how important our mental health is and how it impacts so many other things in our lives. The other thing I want to talk about a little bit too is prevention. Like we're always operating in crisis mode, and I think if we did more prevention work and we had more peer support groups, and which takes me into the whole thought process of the fact that we are very blessed in Pictou County to have so many different groups and organizations, and often a lot of them are trying to get the same government funds, which is kind of sad. We did have a really good organization, the Helpline. I remember years ago I used to train on that and worked on it, and not everyone needs a psychiatrist, not everyone needs a psychologist. Some people just need that listening ear. So it was a real tragedy in my mind that we lost the Helpline. A mental health navigator could help with that as well, to kind of navigate people to where they need to go. So the Helpline, but and a lot of a lot of comments that I received from people, Tierman kept coming up as a wonderful group in our community that sometimes is underrated for the service that they provide and the help that they provide to many, many people that need it. So being blessed with so many different organizations, I think there's a real gap in how we connect those organizations. And I think that's one of the keys to kind of connecting people together. And a navigator would certainly be able to do that and to point people in the right direction, because frankly, hearing stories of people waiting months for mental health care or access is simply unacceptable. If somebody was having a heart attack, we wouldn't have them waiting 3, 4, 5 months for help. So people really need the help. And again, it's a community responsibility. And I think the appetite is there. I think the amount of people that are now talking about mental health and mental illness is so important. And thankfully, Bell Let's Talk really helped us along with that. But we need to stop talking about it, and we need to put some of those things to action. And I'm really glad that this group is heading in that direction and getting the ideas out there, and let's get some things moving. I'm not sure where I am for time, but I think I've probably hit a lot of the areas I hope to hit. I certainly am open for any questions.
We'll do the questions afterwards, Sherry, I think.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Trying. Can you tell Sarah I'm trying?
Okay, Sherry. We can go right to Ryan if you're having trouble.
I am. I can't get... I don't know what I did there.
All right. Ryan.
Take it away, Ryan, because we're all having computer troubles tonight, so it's yours.
Okay, all set there if you can see me.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to speak on this. Something obviously very, very important to our community, and a great opportunity for our police service to shed some light on it from our perspective and our lens. Before I start, I want to thank and acknowledge Sherry for not only her information this evening, very valuable perspective, very informative, and not the easiest topic to discuss from a personal level, and Sherry and I certainly do have a special connection there, and it's something that that I've certainly not forgot about, and something that I value. So just thank you, Sherry, for all the work that you continue to do, and for your information this evening. I want to start by saying the contents of my presentation are basically quantified by local and national statistical data. As well, a lot of my information is qualified by my training, my education, my lived experiences as a police officer over the past several years. As I said, the focus of my presentation will be through the police lens, trying to provide some insight on the current role of local policing as it relates to mental health calls for service. So to put everything into context, I want to start by saying, for anybody who's not aware, the fundamental police mandate consists generally of two duties, one being public safety, ensuring public safety, and two, providing protection. Because of this broad scope and our ever-changing society, new demands drive our priorities. So when we look at our mandate and the priorities that fall down below that, it's always a challenge trying to keep up with the new demands because of the changes. The police are by default becoming the informal first responders of our mental health system. I think we can all agree on that. Statistics demonstrate more frequent police contacts with persons who are in crisis and living with mental illness. Many theories exist on what is stimulating this increase. However, causation is beyond my expertise and beyond my scope, so I don't want to speculate on that too much. So this is basically the contents of my presentation and what I'll look to focus on. I'm big on definitions, so I want to clarify or help people better understand what the police, how we describe or how we define what a mental health call for service is. With that, we hear the term well-being check or wellness check a lot in the media these days, so I'd like to attempt to define that from the police perspective. I think one thing that is really important moving forward is we want people to know what happens when the police are engaged, and keeping in mind this can be difficult because there are so many moving parts and it can be so dynamic. But if we can give a general overview of what to expect, in particular, if you were a person in crisis and you had some doubts or you had some uncertainties about contacting the police, I think it's really important that the public is educated and aware of what to expect. I am going to focus on a few local statistics that I think are relevant. I'm going to talk about stigma and discrimination as it relates to mental health, as well as I want to highlight some successes in terms of police involvement. And then I just want to finish off with some opportunities that we see moving forward. So what is a mental health call, or how do we as police define a mental health call for service? So a person reasonably believed to be mentally unstable and who might pose a threat to themselves, the public, and or the police. This belief is established based on available information and the totality of the circumstances. People who may be experiencing a psychiatric emergency in need of crisis intervention and de-escalation. This could either be a new condition or crisis, or something that is pre-existing. People may be exhibiting signs of psychosis or mental health crisis, but it's actually a symptom of a physical health issue. It could be something such as diabetes, some type of infection, drug-induced psychosis, dehydration, or a combination of all of those factors. People may be displaying extreme stress, an extreme stress response from trauma, causing an emotional crisis, or a combination of all of the above. So moving on to a well-being check or a wellness check. when police assistance is requested, to contact a person who would have no objection to being located or who is not missing, to basically verify their welfare or their well-being. This could apply to someone who has been unsuccessful at reaching a family member, a neighbor, a friend with pre-existing health issues, or they've not seen the person in a few days and are concerned, such as an elderly person or a person with a mental or physical disability who lives alone. So really, we can see quite often how wellness checks or well-being checks can quickly turn into mental health calls for service. In most cases where they do evolve, it's situations where we have incomplete or partial information in the very beginning, and there's not enough to connect that or refer to it as a mental health call in the very beginning. Quite often they can lead into that classification. So there's a lot to this process, and I'll try to sum it up as best I can. What happens when the police are called? And I think this is a really, really important subject to touch on, especially for people in crisis, people who are maybe reluctant to reach out, uncertain of the process. And I'm going to get into it later on, but maybe there's some misinformation or there's some stigmas there, some barriers that are preventing a person from reaching out to the police. So like most calls for service, they start with some type of police contact, either from a third party. The subject of the incident can initiate the contact, or it could be an observation that's made by the police officer. This is typically followed by an assessment that involves the collection and analyzing of available information. And I'm going to touch on gaps in information as we move forward. From there, we collaborate, formulate an opportunity and a lawful response. And again, this is determined based on the available information at the time. Keeping in mind these situations are generally time sensitive if we're talking about a crisis, and we're often dealing with something that is very ambiguous, something quite often where there's either misinformation or major gaps in information. So we're trying to make the best decision we can with the information that we have available. Next, we look to mitigate the risk to the public, the police, and the people involved. This ultimately leads to some sort of direct contact between the police and the individual who requires the service. So in that, and I touched on a few, certainly some challenges and barriers that exist when we have police responding to mental health calls for service, in particular crisis calls. We're very mindful and aware of the fact that the police presence can serve as a trigger in terms of the traditional role of police. So quite often people associate the role of police as strictly law enforcement, as arresting people and processing them through a justice system for the purpose of punitive measures. We're also aware that our uniform, our presence can be a trigger, as depending on somebody's experience or their perceptions as it relates to the police. And again, kind of going back to that traditional role of policing. So we're evolving, but we're also aware that our presence and the uniform represent different things to different people based on their experience. Again, I touched on this. Another challenge or another barrier is often inadequate, incomplete, or incorrect information. Situations are very dynamic. Decisions are time sensitive and made under ambiguous circumstances at best. We're at an intersection with social issues, quite often involving health and justice. There's challenges and barriers involving the balance of privacy and safety. That's a real challenge, and I could probably speak on that topic all evening. So moving forward, one of the other challenges and barriers for us is statistically, the state of mental health is likely underrepresented based on how we collect data and how we score occurrences. So we have a primary scoring and a secondary scoring in terms of nature of call. So quite often we have incidents that are categorized by a primary scoring where it could be a criminal offense involved, you know, an assault or a theft or a property damage, something like that. And we have underlying mental health issues or mental illness involved. And we're not capturing that data as clear as we can, or we're not being able to extract that data as best we could. So I believe police statistics are underrepresenting the true state of this issue. And again, prioritizing services can be a challenge or a barrier too. When I talked about the intersection of social issues between health and justice. So when we have people that come into contact with the police involving mental health issues, but also criminal matters, how well are we prioritizing the service to that individual? Because unfortunately, those two services work quite independently for the most part. So, you know, how well are we making sure that the person is receiving the service they need in the priority that they need as well? So some local statistics, just to put this into perspective, and I'll talk about how these relate to national statistics. I apologize if anybody's having a difficult time reading these charts, but I will discuss them. If you look, I guess it'd be on my far left. The first chart is 2018 local statistics. So this would encompass the town of Glasgow and the town of Trenton, the areas of jurisdiction for our police service. In total, if you were to put the mental health calls and well-being calls together, in 2018, we responded to 462 calls for service. In 2019, combined mental health and well-being checks, 461. In year-to-date for 2020, your third chart in the green, those statistics are up until the 7th day of December, last week of this year. Our total is at 490. So what that means is we're at about a 6%, little over 6% increase for this year as of December 7th. So we have about three more weeks of data to collect there for this year, but we can see an obvious increase this year, 2018, 2019 being mostly consistent, and a slight increase for 2020. So what we see here in these charts for 2018, 2019, and year-to-date 2020, pretty much about the same. Some minor variations here, but mental health calls account for about 7.5 to 8% of our overall calls for service. So if we look at 2018, our police service responded to 462. All other calls for service were 5,000. It's too small for me to read, 5,688. And that's about on par for the rest of the year. You can see that slightly up for 2020 year to date. We're at 7.9%, 7.99% of our overall calls for service involve some type of mental health. Some interesting information here, just as it relates to us on the national level. So I'll start with 20. There's some old data here, but I believe it's relevant. StatsCan did not have more current information as it relates to these statistics, but dated, but also relevant. So we see that 1 in 5 police contacts nationally involve a person with a mental health or substance use disorder, which is very high. Mental health disorders, this is 2012 as well, mental health disorders are more prevalent among low-income Canadians. Moving forward to 2020, we can see this year nationally, well-being checks have increased by 4% across the country. Also, a stat from this year is mental health apprehensions have increased by 2.8% across Canada. And mental health calls for service have increased by 10.6%. So we are a bit below the national average as it relates to at least New Glasgow and Trenton. We're sitting at just over 6%, and the rest of the country is at 10.6%. Something I don't have numbers on, but while we're in this area, one thing I can qualify locally this year in particular is the dramatic increase that we've seen in self-harm severity and frequency, along with other critical incidents and other serious calls for service involving barricaded persons and incidents involving the use or threat of weapons. So I don't have the statistical data to quantify this, but speaking, from my firsthand experience in 2020, the severity, the frequency of more serious incidents involving mental health are dramatically on the rise in our local area. So moving on to stigma and discrimination. We've seen certainly some unfounded negative beliefs exist that persons with mental illness or persons in crisis are violent or more likely to commit a criminal offense. Well, we know this to not be true. Most often, aggressive behavior is observed in the form of self-harm or consistent with self-protection and prevention. This is misinterpreted quite often with violence. There are also unfounded negative beliefs that police are more likely to resolve mental health related calls with use of force. We know that some of these causes include personal experience, some of the media themes, inconsistent training, lack of education and training, lack of awareness, perception. And this is often formulated by mis or overrepresentation of instances with negative outcomes, not so much the process or the facts or the data involved in the particular cases. So some facts and myths, as I just covered. Myth: persons in crisis are more likely to be violent. We know this to not be true. Persons in crisis are more likely to cause self-harm than to harm another person. Another myth is persons with mental illness are more likely to commit a criminal offense. We know that persons with mental illness are more likely to be a victim of a crime. So, framing success. This comes with a caveat that I want to define success from our lens, and it's based on today's standards and resources. We know, and I'll capture this in my closing with the opportunities, we know there's always room for improvement, regardless of the model or regardless of the available resources. Understanding everyone may have a different view on success, it's important to illustrate what factors we look at in determining success today. In terms of police intervention of a crisis, we consider the decision-making process and the outcome. Our measurable criteria include achieving our priorities of safety, which include public, police, and the subject. We focus on de-escalation, on our ability to de-escalate, connecting the person with healthcare because we're talking about a health crisis, and an after-action review for us to objectively look at our decision-making process and where we can improve. Keeping in mind our response, our individual responses to sensationalism of negative outcome, media reports, and how we can perceive a misrepresentation of what is actually occurring. Media reports of shootings and use of force involving people who have a mental illness have become increasingly prevalent. It is important to put these stories into perspective and understand that in Canada as a whole, police rarely use deadly force with anyone. However, what is disproportionate is the number of persons with mental illness that are involved in police use of force incidents. So, finishing up on successes, it's important to note that most crises involving the police are de-escalated without injury or death. Many lives are saved by police intervention, and the majority of interactions result in a connection with healthcare and support. Speaking locally and most recently, I see our success stories daily. I see the safe resolution of many critical incidents, most of which do not make the mainstream media for obvious reasons, including privacy. But our officers, our members are dealing with basically 1.5 mental health calls per day. And like I said, with the increase in severity and frequency, we're seeing, at least locally, we're seeing de-escalation, we're seeing lives being saved and people being connected with healthcare. So locally, it's important that we highlight our successes. So just to conclude, with all of this, we see an opportunity. So to highlight, police contacts with people in crisis or people living with mental illness are steadily rising and projected to continue rising. The frequency of these contacts, in my opinion, presents an opportunity. So an opportunity to better integrate and look at shared services with police, a more intelligence-led approach, so better aligning the use of resources with new priorities, true partnerships, not that we don't have partnerships today, but we can look at, much beyond information sharing, a more collaborative approach, similar to other community services where we see justice, health, education, social services as equal stakeholders in the process. Better connecting and supporting, better follow-up care after the crisis. I talk about this quite often. The police being the tip of the spear in terms of mental health crisis response, the missed opportunity for the follow-up care. So it's very difficult to connect somebody with aftercare in the middle of a crisis, and obviously not the most appropriate time to look at that response, but there's an opportunity there with that contact to provide that follow-up care and contact with the individual. And of course, advanced training to evolve with our role and best practices. So, looking at the crisis we're in, looking at the projections and providing our members with the best training available and contemporary training to best suit the needs of the crisis that we're in. So that's the end of my presentation. There will be time after the last presentation for questions. I just want to thank everyone for their time and for their opportunity to share this information. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Ryan. That was great. And I will, just like Ryan said, remind anybody if they have any questions to type them into the Q&A box on the bottom there, and we will get to as many as we can. So, all right, we're moving on to Monique Harquail. Hi, Monique.
Hi, everyone. Hold on here, I'm going to share my screen. Again, my name is Monique Harquail. I'm the mental health coordinator with the Fredericton Police Force, and I'm here to speak about our team here. We call it the shortened version is the hub, but we are the integrated community services team. Let's see here. Change the, so the the new chief that came in June of 2019 did a reorganization of the police services. They did a refocus on the core policing services as well, and decided to enhance the internal supports and services such as the youth services, mental health services, and victim witness services. We have 4 social workers that are hired here at the Fredericton Police Force. We thought, since we found that it was very important to have services for individuals coming into contact with the police on the mental health lens, the youth at risk, and the victim support and intimate partner violence, community relations, multicultural services as well. We decided to do an environmental scan. We decided to see what was the trends, where do we need to focus, and this is how we came up with the hub. This came out of the Prince Albert model, and I think it came back from Scotland initially, and it was a way of different services coming together, including the police services, in order to collaborate and identify and support individuals that are coming into contact with the police or at risk, or that need some supports that they may be falling through the gaps in services for other social services. So what we've done is a hybrid of that model, where they call it the situation table. And we did a lot of research on this and discovered that we have a lot of services in our community that are hub-like, such as the CCR. That would be for the intimate partner violence coordination. So that was the coordinated community response. That is a group where they have multi-agencies coming together to support victims of intimate partner violence and address safety issues and support them through the process. And also with the ISD model here is the integrative service delivery for children and youth that are in school or at risk of leaving school and have mental health struggles as well. And it's a collaboration between a lot of different systems. So when we decided what we were going to do with the hub, and we had internal focus from a lot of our members, such as the 4 social workers and the intimate partner violence officer, the coordinator, and the multicultural and the community relations officer as well. So we decided to come up with a hybrid with this hub and collaborate between ourselves and with our community partners, which we're still in the first year. We have just brought on the victim witness support services as well to our hub. It's very complementary to what we're doing. So the John sizes here. The hub is, as part of patrols, the integrative service community services, the ICS team, bring us together important social and community support services such as mental health, youth services, intimate partner violence, crime prevention, and victim witness services to assist individuals and families in the community. We focus on prevention, early intervention, and complex high-risk interventions. It's very, very crucial to look at all of those, like the prevention, the early intervention, and the complex interventions as well. And for each sort of level of risk or need, we really focus on a tailored, unique sort of approach for each situation. And we do collaborate with our partners to make sure that people are on in the right services at the right time. So as you see here, there's here's all of the staff here within the Fredericton Police Force, and it's sort of an overlap to show how we could potentially overlap with all of our services here, or we could team up with somebody else from the group, such as if I'm with the mental health piece and there is intimate partner violence going on, and there is children and youth involved, so then we would have the mental health piece, the IPV piece, and the youth services. And then the victim witness would come into play as well for the support to the victims and the witnesses for that. So it really, it's a complementary sort of idea that we have. I'm just going to quickly go through sort of what we do. The Intimate Partner Violence Coordinator is an officer. He supports individuals and families that are experiencing IPV. He works with high-risk individuals on risk mitigation, safety planning, and access to services. He reviews all the IPV files and identifies patterns, assesses risk, and ensures policing standards. Educate on risk assessment tools and IPV Intervention Act, and he is our missing persons coordinator as well. He also trains the officers on the ODARE, and that's one of our risk assessment tools for IPV. And he's a very important part of the hub because there's there's a high prevalence in New Brunswick with IPV. Next is our community and multicultural liaison. Is an officer, and right now we're in the reorganizing of our services as well, and we're going to be adding another officer and a supervisor to be a part of the hub. The liaison is responsible for the prevention and reduction of crime through public education and the development of maintenance and maintenance of community partnerships. He's specifically focusing on the youth, newcomers, immigrants, and seniors. He coordinates and attends community events and public meetings. He runs the Senior Advisory Committee. He's the multicultural liaison. I've had the pleasure of going to the multicultural services here with him to help support individuals that have questions that maybe they might be struggling with, or they're curious about some of the services that we provide. Also, the Kids and Cops, that's a program that we have for the kids in the summer that he assists with, and assisting in interventions with clients that come into frequent contact with the police. Our next, I'm sorry here. Our next person is our youth services. This is a social worker. She identifies youth in need by assessing risk factors that contribute to them coming into contact with police. She liaisons with the youth and the families to connect with relevant programs and services. She makes sure that they're connected, and if they're not connected, is there a barrier to getting those services? Sometimes it's not knowing what services to turn to, and she collaborates with the partner agencies to address the youth issues. And she's also liaises with the schools on the VITRA, that's our violent threat risk assessment protocols. She also plays a part with the ISD team, and that is the hub-like structure that I spoke to you about the integrated service delivery model that is organized through the school districts and our mental health services. The mental health coordinating role, that's my role. So what I do here is I review the files related to people that are coming into contact with the police through mental health crisis. I try to identify the needs and concerns, and then I collaborate with external services to try to find out if they're on a waiting list, if they're on the right waiting list, or if I can maybe expedite if it's a high risk situation, case conference with our partners for high risk situations. I try to work with individuals that may have come into contact with our officers, and then I'll do a follow-up as well to see how they're doing, who they're connected to, how can I assist, what kind of barriers are happening. If somebody was apprehended under the Mental Health Act and had to go to the hospital and was released, I follow up with a call to see how things were going, and make sure that they know of the services that are involved, that they can have access to in the community, and they can use me as a resource as well, maybe to advocate. That is it's beneficial, because what we're trying to do as well is decrease the apprehension rates under the Mental Health Act and provide services in the community when they are in crisis. We have a great little collaboration with our addictions and mental health team through their mental health or their mobile crisis unit, and we try to get them connected that includes an intake to mental health services. To see if we can support them, and then they can decrease their the calls of services here, and to make sure that they're connected to the right services. The next services that we have is in the hub is the victim witness service. This is brand new. This is something that we're just in the motions of getting them involved in the hub. And what they do is they provide crisis support to victims and witnesses in crisis situations. They're right at the scene. They provide, afterwards, they provide short-term counseling or crisis support to victims, family members, and witnesses. And they also prepare victims and witnesses for court proceedings, because it's a very, it can put a lot of people into crisis as well, and it helps to support them to make sure that they feel comfortable with the court proceedings, because there's a lot of unknowns there, and they help provide information and referral services. And that's a common theme that we have between all of our hub members, is that we make sure that if the information on who's available for services, if they need counseling, if there's something that housing, to income support, to supporting for parenting, whatever it may be, we try to think outside the box and try to support them as best we can and advocate for services to engage. So again, looking ahead, we're adding 2 uniform officers and 2 victim witness service staff to the team. We're constantly having ongoing conversations about the coordinated approach to crisis response. I've been assisting officers as well, sometimes attending calls with them. And I've supported the officers as well through if there's barricaded persons, and sort of give a mental health support and feedback to the officers as well. Just trying to fill in the gaps. We're really trying to evaluate what services we have in the community. We have a lot of services going, but sometimes that we do have gaps, and we try to identify them and then try to work with our partners to see if we can close those gaps up. I think that's it for my presentation. I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of questions, but yeah, thank you very much.
two of them are mine.
Okay, great information, Monique. Thank you. So now we're moving on to the question and answer period. And please, like we said before, if you have a question that comes up from one of the presentations or a question that comes to your head after somebody else asks a question, feel free to type it into the Q&A box there, and hopefully time will allow us to get to it. If you have a question for a specific panelist, please indicate that, or if it's for anyone on the panel, just let us know. So we're going to start off. We have 4 questions, right? And the first question is, I guess it's for anybody, any one of our panelists. And given that statistics suggest that many situations that result in charges and prosecutions intersect with mental health, how can we potentially advocate for a mental health court in our area? Who would like to take that? One of our panelists? That's great. We have Monique and Ryan. So let's start to my left, and we'll do Ryan second. So Monique, do you want to go first?
In New Brunswick here, we do have a mental health court down in St. John, and we've been looking at the Vancouver model as well, because they have a mental health court, but they also have an addictions court, which is quite interesting. And so we're really trying to advocate the potential to have a mental health court here. But in the meantime, part of my role is to advocate when there is somebody that comes into contact with the police that have primary mental health struggles that are sort of a primary to maybe what they're being accused of a crime or whatever it is. I try to flush out what's been going on and advocate, and there's parts that I will do is go down to the courts and advocate with the Crown and the defense to make sure that they see the whole picture of what's been happening, so they can understand that there might have not been a criminal intent, and it might have been just a struggle at that point with their mental health. Of course, we do have the mental health review board here through the not criminally responsible and the fitness, but that's another part of it. But with the mental health courts down in St. John, they had it's a voluntary service where they end up doing a lot more work because there's a lot more accountability on making sure that they're following treatment and they're doing the things they need to do in order to move forward. And so it's quite interesting. I've seen the courts, and I can really appreciate that that there's a need for those types of courts.
Can you just sum up for people who may not know what a mental health court is, what the difference between that is and like a normal court, if there's such a thing, so that they'll know more about what the importance of a mental health court is?
Okay, so the mental health court is, so what would happen is that you would, well, it depends on who, it's different with every jurisdiction who has them, but it's typically going to a regular court and then having your lawyer or the counsel advocate for you to say, I would like to be considered for the mental health court. Counsel would state what's been going on, and then the Crown agree, and the judge moves forward. They then move into a different type of court, which has psychiatry, and there's assessments, and there's a lot of things that happen. And it's a review court that basically says, here's what we need from you to move forward. And then if it's if you complete what the doctors are recommending and what the courts are recommending, then we can complete this.
Okay.
Sometimes there's conditional discharges and that sort of thing.
Okay, great. Thank you. Ryan, you wanted to add something to that?
Sure. So just the caveat to this is that obviously we don't have that service here, and our members, we don't have experience in dealing with the mental health courts. However, they, from what I gather, they've been successful in other regions and other provinces. That being said, the courts are the responsibility of the province, of the provincial government. And if my recommendation, if anybody was looking to advocate to pursue that in our region, certainly, something that we would be, as a police service, we would look to explore as well, to see if there was any way that that we could support that agenda. But also, when we talk about responsibility for the courts and we talk about the province, if that's, as an advocate or a member of the public, if that's something that you would see as relevant, I would encourage you to start those conversations, with your elected officials, with your MLAs, and that's something that would need to be addressed through the Department of Justice and the Minister of Justice. So just following those channels of communication and starting to have the conversations with the people who are responsible for providing the court services to the province of Nova Scotia, that would be a good starting point. And then obviously looking to the community to see what existing services you need to support that agenda.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ryan. Our next question is for Sherry Blinkhorn. When people call you looking for supports, what are they mainly looking for?
I would say the bulk of the calls would come from parents, maybe with adult children that have severe issues and they don't know where to turn. Services within the county, wondering where they would reach out. Sometimes people are calling just to vent about how they're waiting, how they can't get their medication, how they don't have a family doctor. They're reaching out to figure out how to maneuver, for lack of better words, the system to get care and get access. And there's pages it's mostly on access to service and how to get access, and feeling like they're not part of the pictures. Like families want to know more and be part of the process of their loved one's illness, and they feel detached, or there may not be a discharge plan. If they've gone to ER and they've left, they don't know what else to do.
What needs to be in place for these people then, Sherry? You mentioned before, like there was the listing near the helpline, or they might have been able to hook up with some community contacts there. That's not available anymore. Where are they getting these community contacts now?
Well, and I think that's really the gap. That's I really believe a mental health navigator for the province, and then one for each community that would kind of be the call that maybe Helpline used to get. We used to have a booklet of services that were up to date that we would put out, and of what was available. So if somebody needed, maybe it was Cancer Society, a contact they needed, funding for that. Maybe it would be Tierman House, or maybe the Women's Center, or New Leaf. Just someone, there needs to be that go-to place where people can call and say, okay, this is my issue, almost like a telephone triage. This is the problem. And a lot of times people are in crisis. So when they're in crisis, they really don't know what to do. And a lot of times you can't get somebody who is in a full-blown psychosis to go to ER. So what do? And, their other option is to call police, and that sometimes escalates the issue.
Definitely. All right. Thank you, Sherry. Monique, this question is for you. Can you describe the structure of how the hub integrates with the education system?
How it integrates with the education system. Well, with the ISD that I was talking about, with the integrated service delivery model, that was a model that's from the district to the youth mental health team, and the police are ad hoc members of this common plan case conferencing. We only become involved if police are involved. And we try to be as preventative as possible. There might be a youth coming into contact with us to doing, maybe doing, you know, the, let's say, stealing, you know, from other people's lockers or whatever it may be. We try to peel back. It's not just doing that act. It's more of what's happening for that youth, and really trying to peel back all the layers to find out what exactly is going on, and maybe address it into a more proactive, and see what services are needing, and then playing an advocating role here. And that's part of what the social workers do here, is the advocating, and to help people understand what's going on. And if services are not involved, we get them involved. And then if the youth looks like it's going to be a charge, we advocate for youth diversion, extrajudicial measures, extrajudicial sanctions. So basically keeping out of the courts, and connecting them to the extrajudicial sanctions, which is youth diversion. And it's not just to look at accountability, but it's more of what are the services and needs the youth, you know, to help them move forward and be successful. And sometimes it's the family as well. Maybe it's the family unit that may need some extra support, and then that's so we try to be collaborate with everybody as much as possible. That's why I'm kind of not really sure what question, how to answer this, because there's lots of different ways that we can be involved with the education folks, but we really try to advocate for the youth as much as possible to break down those barriers and help them just move forward.
Okay, great, thank you. Ryan, we'll put this question to you, but anybody can answer it after you if they prefer. Are the police getting enough training in school, and also when working to make them more effective in assisting those experiencing a mental health crisis?
So this is what we talk about when we look at a enhanced model or different models in terms of policing, and you know, much like what Monique has been talking about, a more integrated approach, or a hub model, integrated community service approach. You know, you're talking about that line between justice and education. So whose role and whose responsibility is that? So those are the things that when we're looking to the future. So traditionally, we've seen the police in schools delivering different education pieces, whether it's DARE or other preventative or education type of models. There's, you know, I'm no expert in any of the education pieces that have been delivered over the years, but they've certainly evolved. And you know, we've seen that certain approaches are less effective than others through studies, and we've seen that certain education pieces arguably have caused more harm than good. So we have to be very cautious in that approach. You know, simply putting the police in the school to deliver a message, you know, that all sounds great, but unless there's better coordination with justice, and when I say justice, I mean the police and education and other relevant services, whether it's you know, social, healthcare, we have to be sure that we're delivering a consistent message, and that the message is more helpful than harmful. So we're not experts in education, and we don't hold ourselves out to be. Certainly a role that I would like to see us more active in, but it has to be a coordinated effort, and there has to be credibility behind the education piece, and it has to be it has to serve that purpose, and it, you know, kind of tried and tested, and you know, it has to be some type of qualified message that we're delivering. We don't mind being that messenger, but again, you know, we have to achieve that collaboratively, and it can't just be us, you know, going to the school saying, hey, we'd like to deliver this message. We need everybody on board, and it has to be, we have to make sure that we're delivering the right messaging, if that makes sense. I think there was a second part of the question there.
There wasn't, and Lynn took my sheet, so I don't, just a second here, hold on.
I might be able to see it in Q&A.
And also, when working to make them more effective in assisting those experiencing a mental health crisis. So
the education piece, is that what I understand? Making, you know, people better, more, you know,
more effective, more resilient. Yeah.
And yeah, so again, that ties into the answer that I gave. That you know, there's, you know, I'm aware that there's a lot of education pieces out there that are very helpful, and a lot of this work is being done, you know, in the schools right now. And you know, is that our role? Is that something that we could be involved in to help people better cope with crisis? You know, I'm not opposed to any of those conversations, but again, we're not the experts in teaching people how to cope with crisis, nor do we want to assume that role. So messaging is key, and you know, we want to be sure that, you know, we're delivering that message that is consistent with all of our partners. And you know, we can be part of that process, but I just don't think that that we need to be you know, the tip of the spear with that. Though a lot of those things are being done in the school as we speak right now. You know, could there be more? There's, like I said in my presentation, there's room for improvement everywhere, but we just have to be really, I think we have to be aware of what our role is in this, and what we're qualified to do and what we're not qualified to do.
Okay, well, I'll pose this one to you, and then like I said, anybody can answer after as well. What community supports do police want or need to support people with mental health issues? If you had a wish list, what would be on it?
So integration, that's the key, because we see multifaceted social issues. Like when we're looking at our mental health calls, and we're looking at mental health crisis, we're not dealing with that in a silo. We're dealing with a whole mixed bag of social issues. So in that, you have to look at all the social services that currently exist, and we need to look at true integration, much like, you know, again, you know, you look at the sequence of presenters here, and you look at what we finished up with, you know, Monique's model that she spoke about. You're seeing a true integration of those portfolios at the same table, because quite often the clients and the people that we're dealing with, they're dealing with, more often than not, they're dealing with more than one social challenge or one social issue. So that's what I want to see, is a better, a real integrated approach. Partnerships beyond just information sharing. I want to see partnerships and collaboration and service delivery.
All right, perfect. I'm not sure this can go to any of the panelists. So what has your experience been in the utilization of the 211 mental health crisis navigation number? And the second part to the question is, and also the 24-hour Nova Scotia mental health crisis hotline.
I think there's still some serious, there's still some gaps there as well. There's a lot of people that don't know what 211 is. And on top of that, there's still, yeah, there's still some gaps there with 211, which is not addressing the needs of people that are calling that number. And I hear that as well, that people are not getting what they're looking for with that number. Just to go back to Ryan's about training and in the schools, and I think, again, I alluded to it earlier about the police, first responders. I know I've had paramedics call me as well saying, where can we get more education on how to deal with people with mental health issues? And I know that in the police force, I'm sure Ryan could speak to that even more, about how even police officers, you know, they're struggling sometimes not knowing how to deal with mental illness and mental health issues as it relates to calls they get, and first responders as a whole, not just police officers.
What about the 24-hour Nova Scotia mental health crisis hotline as well, Sherry? Have you had some experience with people with using that?
I don't hear hear good things about it.
No.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't. I know I often have told people to call that number, and a lot of times they can't get through. Or, I mean, if you live in HRM, I think they have much more. It works better for them, but here in Pictou County, it's not helpful to a lot of people.
Right. Okay. All right. Regarding the, okay, so I'm going to go on to the next question here. Regarding the hub or similar model, what is the level of government that we can advocate to in order to make it an established process? So Monique, maybe you can help us out with that. Where would we start?
Well, when I was previously talking with Ryan about setting up sort of a hub model or what it would look like, we have the internal people that we've created an internal hub that actually breaks out and then creates other little hubs within our partners, and I think is very similar. We have a small community feeling, and the collaboration and the relationships with the other systems, that we can pick up the phone and say, can we do a case conference? This is pretty high risk. And I think, speaking with Ryan, you do have that type of relationship with your partners as well. So I can't really speak to the government part, but I can also speak to, the a hybrid kind of model of having multiple agencies come together, including the police, the mental health, the health services, your family services. There's a lot of different types of community agencies that could come together saying, we want to start working together in a new collaborative way. And there's nothing really stopping. There's no government that's saying you can't be doing that. It's really up to all the agencies saying, let's start working together.
Right.
Before we create this model of the hub model, the official part of it, we were doing this. It was just called relationships and working together. It is possible, and it's you have to actually build it to what your community needs. If I moved back to Alberta and I started creating something there, it would look completely different, because you have to know what the community has, what it needs, what are the relationships with our partners, that sort of thing. So really building on that, and thinking outside the box, and everybody kind of giving everybody kind of permission to think slightly outside the box, and that's the magic of collaboration happens. And you just pick one file at a time, and it's amazing how far you can get around as you get consent from the individual or the family, and that's where the magic happens.
I just was wondering if Ryan could comment if we have something similar like that collaboration happening here in Pictou County at all, or I'm sure you do work with some groups.
So we do have some established processes with certain agencies in terms of information sharing, and that's always been the biggest barrier is privacy and what can we share and what circumstances. That's always the challenge. And if you ask any other government agency when it comes to collaboration, that's they're going to agree. So we've just most recently, I believe it was August when I first reached out to Monique, and we've had some conversations, some dialogue, continued dialogue since then. So, I've really been exploring the hub model as it's applied and working in Fredericton. So the concept certainly isn't new, but the practical application is something that we're very interested in, and how we make that work and how we look at breaking down some of those traditional barriers, in particular, one being the privacy issue. So and it's different for each agency, as you can appreciate, with their own regulations, but something that we're actively exploring for sure.
Okay, great. And Ryan, somebody wanted to know where they could get a hold of your slides on the local statistics. So the webinar and the slides will be made available on YouTube for everybody. So
For sure. Yeah.
All right.
Great. I have a comment about that I forgot to mention.
Sure.
The initial hub that we were sort of modeling from, that we did a hybrid from, away from, I guess, it has it's called the situation table, and that came out of the Prince Albert model. And in there, it actually speaks to the privacy and the flow of information. They have there's a way of de-identifying individuals. So the collaboration can happen without the flow of information that goes as simple as, I have a 24-year-old female, high risk for suicidal ideation. There could be a whole bunch of things. Does everybody agree that this might be at a 24, 48-hour risk? Yes. Then it starts going through all of the steps of the actual situation table. And Ontario put together sort of a free educational thing through Wilfrid Laurier that actually explains all of this. It gives you the manual, and then it speaks to the privacy concerns. So it addresses all of the systems, the privacy issues for that. What happens is you get consent, and then all of a sudden everybody can talk to each other. It's
Okay.
a great little, it's a great process.
Great.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, Monique. So that's going to end our question and answer session. And we're going to move on to how Dominic is going to come back to us here and tell us about how we can get involved in the mental wellness roundtable. Dominic?
Okay. So here we have the contact information. People can text me or phone me or can email me. And we'd definitely love to have people join in on our efforts to create a better system here in responding to these kinds of crises. We've heard some really great ideas on what is working in some other communities. People have raised the idea of having a mental health court. We're looking at possibilities around enhanced training. We're looking at possibilities around integration. And it really is a matter of the community coming together to say, what can we do to make things better? How can we all work together in a better way? And if you would like to get involved, please do contact me or contact Lynn Langille, who is our Community Health Board Coordinator. And we will be having regular meetings of the coordinating committee for the roundtable, but I think we might have need to have a spin-off committee, a subcommittee, which is devoted to working on this hub model or something that is adapted to our local situation. So definitely, we invite you to get in touch and to share your ideas and to get involved. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Dom. Thanks for that. So this is the closing. The webinar planning group would like to offer a sincere thank you to all of our panelists this evening, to Sherry and to Ryan and Monique. Great information from everybody. Their experience, insights, and ideas have given us a lot to think about and will help us move in a better direction of creating more supportive communities that support mental health, wellness, and resilience. We'd also like to thank DL Hines for her graphic design and preparation of tonight's webinar for the promotional materials. And a huge thank you to the Pictou-Antigonish Regional Library and especially Sarah O'Toole for providing us technical support for the webinar with such great skill and patience with us all. Many thanks to those attending the webinar this evening and for being here and your interest in improving mental health in our communities. Be well and be part of helping others be well. Good night.
Okay, good night, folks.
Suanne.